We have on the telephone here this morning Mr. Christian Takushi, who is a distinguished macroeconomist and geopolitical strategist living in Switzerland and is quite well versed and informed on what goes on in the world. Welcome, Christian. Are you there?
Thank you for having me, Ron.
So, how are you today? You're the other end of Switzerland from us. You're where? Are you in Zurich area somewhere?
Yes, between Lake Geneva and Zurich, doing well. Thanks for asking. Quite busy, as you can imagine, with all what's going on in the world economy and also in the landscape of geopolitics.
Well, you sent me this sheet of information, and I was absolutely struck by the importance of it. And I thought we'd take a little time here to talk about it. And this has to do with the Syria situation and what that means for the entire Middle East, and your analysis of that. What's going on down there?
Well, I think there's a lot that one could say about the Middle East currently, but if I could bring it put it in a nutshell, the deterioration in the Middle East is actually advancing, and we currently expect, this is our independent analysis, we expect that there will be at least one or two wars, probably most likely two wars in the Middle East. And the region is advancing in that direction inexorably. And then the additional concern is that one of those two wars is likely to be nuclear.
Wow. And any time frame? It's hard to tell, I suppose.
That is very hard to tell, especially in the Middle East, because so many factors are converging or overlapping. Let me say this, all global powers, all powers in the world, existing and rising ones, are pivoting on the Middle East, especially Jerusalem. But I think many of your readers and listeners do know the situation, a bit about the situation of the Middle East. They've heard of wars in Iraq and Syria. There are probably two factors or two elements they are probably not very acquainted with, because media and our governments are very silent about it, is the role of Europe in all this. And I would say this, the urgent need of Europe for an additional backup source of energy. And the next one is the role of Jerusalem. I mean, Russia, the U.S., Germany, France, everyone, and even the United Nations are all pivoting on Jerusalem.
I'm looking at this pipeline, a map of a pipeline you put in your latest newsletter here. Planned gas oil pipeline, and it kind of bypasses Iraq and goes through Iran, or goes through Iraq, I guess, part of it.
Yes.
What is that about?
As I said, there are many factors coming together, but this is probably the most important and most overlooked or hidden factor. No one wants to talk about this, but in my independent analysis, we see very clearly that the main reason why there is a war and so much ferocious fighting in northeast Syria, northeast Iraq, and so much trouble with the Kurds is because the Europeans would like to have access to Iranian gas and oil. And the cheapest and most efficient way to transport that energy from Iranian fields, these are two major Iranian fields, is via pipelines that go through northern Iraq, or should go in the future through northern Iraq, northern Syria, and Turkey. The big problem for the Iranians, the Turks, and the Europeans is that these are all heavily populated areas of Kurdish people or Kurdish forces. So the Kurds are the problem there, and that's the reason why the pipes have to go into Syrian and Iraqi territory. That's also the reason, I believe, why the Turkish army is attacking so strongly now the Kurdish forces on the border between Syria and Turkey. I mean, if you don't know this about the strategic need of Europe for energy or energy backup, you will probably not think of this. You would probably think they're fighting in Syria, fighting in Iraq. They could fight anywhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they don't. They're fighting along the route of the future pipeline.
That's interesting. So the line isn't there yet, but this is where they want to build it from the
Yes.
what sea is that up through Kuwait.
This is coming from intelligence
Yeah.
and different analysis that we've gathered, and we do our own analysis. And for us, it is very clear that there are plans to build a pipeline there. Part of these pipelines on the Iraqi and the Iranian part already been built. On the Turkish side, already finished.
Mm-hmm.
What is missing is the link that goes through northeast Syria, northeast Iraq.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at this pipeline that I've drawn, it's amazing. Some of the heaviest, most ferocious fighting have taken this place. Even ISIS wanted to keep, to have a foothold there. Everyone knows about the importance of that. I think it is rather in Europe that we don't hear anything about it.
That's an interesting observation, and certainly would explain things. I mean, it's an instant coincidence, if not reality. But I'm just looking at the players. I'm just looking at the map here. For example, you got Iran, Iraq, right next door to each other. Just across the bay is Saudi Arabia, this large country. And then we see Yemen, which has hotted up over the last decade or so. All of these different players having different allegiances, and it seems like it's squishing into the Saudis and the Israelis. That's an odd relationship, isn't it?
Yes, it is an alliance of necessity, but so is the alliance between Turkey and Iran as well. The strange situation in the Middle East that we have at the moment is that this conflict between Shia and Sunni has advanced so much. It's actually taking place, it's being overlapped by the rise of Turkey itself. And the rise of Turkey has influenced this whole conflict in a way that now you have, on the one hand, Russia, Turkey, and Iran joining forces together in a kind of alliance of necessity, forcing, on the other hand, Saudi Arabia to ask military help from Israel. Yes, you hear well. We ascertain that Saudi Arabia has asked Israel for military help to protect itself against a possible Iranian first strike. But of course, the United States is the one coordinating that alliance. It is actually very interesting that this is happening. And one thing you see is that the European Union, especially Berlin, is embracing Iran. For the last 7 to 9 years, Germany is building very good, strong relationship with Iran. But it's not just Germany. We shouldn't single it out. There's quite a number of nations, including the United States, that are being embracing Iran. And yes, this is actually becoming geopolitical. The one thing we should actually remark is the role of Europe, something that you don't see much about. The media avoids it. Our leaders avoid it.
Mm-hmm. Now, what I see, if the way you've kind of divided up the two sides in any potential war, there would be on the one hand Russia, Turkey, Iran, Syria, Lebanon, surprisingly, Gaza, and Yemen. That's on one hand. And on the other side would be the USA with Kurdish forces, Israel, Saudi Arabia. Do you hold to that?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
There is also the possibility on the side of the U.S. that Egypt will be plugged in, and on the side of Iran, Turkey, that Iraq will be pulled in too. But at the moment, I see 8 combatant nations or territories, if we include the Kurdish forces. Interesting thing here is the following. The Kurdish forces have been acting as a buffer. The Iranian government, Tehran, I mean, when I speak of the Iranians, I mean the government in Tehran.
Yes.
They see the Kurdish forces as a buffer that is protecting Israel. And this is where Turkey is helping Iran now. They're attacking the Kurds from the north, forcing the Kurdish forces to move up the north. That actually opens the way for Iran to actually feel more confident to attack Israel. Iran is already very present in Lebanon. They are building up the military presence in Lebanon, also in Syria, behind the Golan Heights.
Right.
That's very close to Israel. And it's also building up the military presence in the Gaza Strip through Hamas. Now, Turkey is helping also in the Gaza Strip. Iran and Turkey together are actually at the moment helping Hamas to prepare for or gear up for a conflict with Israel. Interestingly, we have reports, several reports that point to the organization Hamas to tolerate, initiate, or even stage a humanitarian crisis in the Gaza Strip. We hear that they are stopping some water utilities and other important vital services. It might be pure coincidence. We cannot be sure, and I have to put a question mark on it. But it could be. If we look at the history, this organization has not cared so much about the health of the civilian population. They have used actually civilians as shields. And if they're preparing for a conflict with Israel, and it wouldn't be so surprising that they are maybe staging a decline or collapse of, utility services to accelerate a humanitarian crisis.
Huh.
So it seems that Iran and Turkey are gearing up for a conflict with Israel.
And
rather
rapidly, if I understand. You're
Yes,
saying that
it
they
could
would
be
like to
quite
do it
rapid.
this year, where Russia and U.S., they have elections coming up later this year.
Exactly.
And so they're
That's
trying to
what
hold
I
it
pointed
off.
out in that. Yes, that's what I pointed out in that article. The main reason why Turkey and Iran are accelerating and would like to have it done this year is because both Russia and the U.S. are facing important elections. And, they're going to consume. Actually, Washington cannot afford a war at the moment in the Middle East, a major conflict. As you know, the U.S. administration really is depending now on the economy. The economy is the main positive card for the elections in November, the midterm elections.
Mm-hmm.
And Mr. Putin is facing elections too this spring in Russia.
Listen, we're running out of time here. Christian, how can we contact you for more information on this? Can people contact you and subscribe to your service? How do we do it?
Yes, they can. Thank you. Yes, thank you for asking. People can go on our website, geopoliticaleconomics.org, or they can actually simply write me an email. The easiest way is c.takushi@bluewind.ch.
Takushi is spelled Takushi. Okay, but just Google up geopolitical economics dot.
Org.
Okay, gotta go. Thanks, really appreciate it.
You're
God
welcome.
bless. Good day to you, bro. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you, Ron. Bye.